Everything begins in a peaceful and cozy little village where, inside one of the homes, a family waits with great anticipation to discover which class the son will be blessed with, even though he doesn't seem nearly as excited as the rest. His little sister, however, is overjoyed, already certain that her brother Errol will receive the most powerful class of all. Their mother comments that, if that's true, he'll probably become very popular with the girls, but the jealous younger sister quickly argues that Errol is far too young to be thinking about such things. Their father adds that, at Errol's age, he himself was always surrounded by pretty girls, but none of this seems to impress his son, who remains distant from the conversation, even though the idea of being granted a class is also on his mind. In this world, the goddess blesses every human with a class upon reaching the age of 10. Along with it come the skills necessary to perform that role, which could range from being a mighty sorcerer to something as simple as a village baker. After the family gathering, the long-awaited day finally arrives. The ritual of blessing begins, and one of the community's priests steps forward in the town's temple, standing before a statue of the goddess. Soon, the first child is called to the stage. The priest touches his staff to the boy's forehead and immediately feels the power of flames, along with the scent of iron and hammer. With that, the boy is declared a blacksmith. As time goes on and the children present themselves one by one to receive their classes, Errol's sister is brimming with pride over their family's bloodline, convinced it will influence the blessing and grant her brother a powerful class. When Errol's name is finally called, everyone holds their breath, eager to know the future of the village's most famous couple's child, the Sword Princess Farah and the Archmage Leon, both renowned for their advanced classes. On stage, the priest instructs Errol to close his eyes so that he may feel the goddess's blessing, but the boy feels nothing. The priest, too, senses nothing at all. The audience begins to murmur in unease at the absence of any response. After carefully analyzing this rare case, the priest delivers his conclusion. Errol is a child with no class. His sister protests in outrage, refusing to accept it, while his parents are left deeply disappointed. Afterward, Errol is back at home, practicing with a sword in the yard. While his parents try to console him, they explain that he doesn't need to worry about getting a job, since they will still work even after retirement. But Errol insists that he doesn't want to be a burden. His little sister, trying to act like the older one, promises to help him just as she always has. Frustrated at always being treated as pitiful, Errol calls his family together and makes one thing clear. He doesn't care about being classless. He has been studying fencing with his mother since childhood, and even if he didn't receive a class, he can still wield a sword. One day, his hard work will pay off. His mother is moved by his maturity at such a young age, and his father believes that Errol will be able to turn fate to his favor when he grows older, just as his sister has always believed her big brother is the best. Still tired of all the sentiment, Errol excuses himself and goes to the training grounds. When he arrives, two boys are sparring, each showing impressive sword techniques. They boast about how amazing it is to have a class, since they can feel strength flowing naturally from within. When Errol approaches, they immediately recognize him as the classless boy from the ritual and ask what he's doing there. Errol explains that he came to train like anyone else. One of them smirks, saying that as swordsmen they don't even need to train. Coming here is just to test their abilities. To prove it, he calls his partner back, and the two resume their duel, once again demonstrating a power Errol never had, and, in their eyes, never will. Each strike echoes through the air with such force that it feels as if two grown warriors were clashing rather than children. Watching carefully, Errol thinks to himself that the first technique any swordsman learns is basic fencing, which alone makes them skilled fighters. But he doesn't want to just stand by and watch. He calls out, challenging either of them to spar. The cockier boy bursts out laughing, mocking him, but Errol answers with confidence, saying it will still be a fair fight. Enraged by his certainty, the boy demands to know if Errol at least has the goddess's divine protection. Even without a class, Errol replies that he does. Divine protection is another blessing from the goddess, but unlike classes, it is granted to every human at birth. It is like an invisible web that surrounds the body and absorbs damage. Still, if one takes too many hits, the pain eventually comes through. Satisfied with that, the arrogant boy agrees to fight, though Errol warns him to be ready to eat his words. The taunt makes him furious, and in a burst of anger, he charges before the duel is even officially started. Errol reacts swiftly, not only blocking the strike, but twisting his blade to break the boy's guard. This only fuels the boy's rage. He swings again, but Errol blocks once more. From then on, the fight is firmly under Errol's control. Unwilling to accept defeat, the arrogant boy calls his partner to join in, and the other quickly agrees. Errol narrowly avoids a cowardly strike from behind, but he doesn't complain. He relishes the challenge. Fighting two opponents his own age feels like useful training, especially compared to the countless beatings he's taken from his mother at home. In the heat of the fight, the arrogant boy scolds his partner for attacking poorly, which makes Errol wonder if people with classes ever learn teamwork. judging by the chaotic way they fight. Maybe they're easier prey than they think. Convinced of this, Errol steps forward and knocks down the scrawny one of the duo with a sharp blow of his sword's hilt to the chin. Now there's only the alpha left, the so-called final boss, who threatens his opponent with big words. But when it's time to prove himself, he trips over his own partner and leaves himself wide open. Errol smacks the back of his neck with the flat of the blade. He doesn't even use the edge. Otherwise, heads would have rolled. As if losing under those conditions wasn't humiliating enough, the pair still mutters that Errol cheated. Since they won't accept defeat, the three of them agree to a rematch. But before it can happen, another boy steps into the training grounds and tells the losers to cut it out because in a real battlefield, no enemy will care about the whining of two clowns. The cocky one immediately curses him, but his partner tells him to pipe down, since that redhead is serious trouble. The redhead approaches Errol and recognizes him as the son of Farah, the sword princess, pointing out that only her son could handle a blade with that kind of skill. Even so, he warns Errol not to let victory get to his head. Then, he challenges him to a duel, just to show this so-called classless boy what a true swordsman is capable of. The skinny one whispers to the cocky one that the redhead has ties to the captain of the guard, and the redhead himself confirms Captain Evans is his father. At the mention of that name, Errol remembers Evans as the man who once came to his house to call his mother out on a demon hunt. The son, however, looks nothing like him. The father's appearance was far harsher and worn. The redhead bristles at hearing his father's name and makes it clear that not only is the captain a master of the sword, he's also a respected leader among all. Still, the son can't understand how Errol's mother could be considered the #1 swordswoman of the village. Annoyed, he asks Errol if he agrees with that, and Errol replies without hesitation that his mother is, in fact, the most powerful person in the village. The redhead smirks, reminding him that children inherit the strength of their parents, and that's why he's going to beat the brat down and prove his family is far superior. Besides, he's been a swordsman for over a year and already mastered intermediate techniques. Surely, he'll wipe the floor with this kid. And since Errol has shown from the start that he's not the type to back away from a fight, the two clash right then and there. This duel is clearly a step above the last, impressing not only the previous rivals but also the redhead himself, who admits the match is more balanced than he expected. Still, he has a trump card up his sleeve. Meanwhile, Errol notices that his opponent's anger is making him sloppy. That recklessness could be a weakness. He takes advantage, deflecting a strike. He crouches low and goes in for a piercing counter with the enemy's guard wide open, but the redhead reacts instantly, unleashing his twin blade slash. Errol blocks the first strike, but the second slams into his divine protection. Clutching his wound, the boy can't understand how his rival managed to land 2 strikes at once. The redhead seizes the moment, sneering that a classless like Errol could never hope to defend against such a technique. Still, he admits the kid's got guts for even accepting the duel. Days later, Errol is jolted awake by the most annoying alarm clock on the face of the earth, his little sister. Half asleep, he jumps up and accidentally headbutts her, which ends up being a kind of accidental revenge. At breakfast, she begs her big brother not to push himself so hard in training, because one day, she'll create a world where he can live in peace. Hearing that, Errol can't help but laugh warmly before heading out. After he leaves, she worries aloud he's been staying out late every day, coming home beaten and bruised from his relentless training. To calm her, Farah takes the girl to a chest full of broken swords, every one of them snapped during Errol's practice. In other words, the boy knows how to handle himself. Still, even reassured, his little sister promises to make the world a better place for him. Meanwhile, Errol dives into his daily training and shows he's mastered the twin blade slash. Turns out, he let himself take a beating just so he could study and learn the move. Right on cue, a goblin jumps out from the bushes to ambush him. Errol ends it swiftly using that very technique. But then, a deep, chilling roar echoes from within the forest. It signals something far worse lurking in the trees. Terrified the village might be attacked, Errol rushes toward the guards, but the desperate scream of a child pulls him straight into the woods. There, he finds none other than the redhead lying wounded. Standing before him is a hobgoblin, a monster that never shows up in these lands. Several larger goblins lie dead around the training grounds, proof that the redhead fought them off before. Sizing up the hulking enemy, Errol realizes he needs to focus more on his footing than his wrist. Timing will be everything. With that in mind, he steadies himself, adjusts his stance, and unleashes the twin blade slash at the perfect moment, bringing the beast down. Afterward, he notices the redhead's holy water smashed on the ground. Without hesitation, Errol hands over his own flask, letting him restore his divine protection. The redhead recovers almost instantly, only to demand how a classless like Errol managed to perform the twin blade slash. Calmly, Errol explains that he had to train hard to master such a complex move. He also points out that he studied how the redhead used it again and again during their fight, and it was by enduring those blows that he managed to learn it later. Finally, Errol adds that he still wants a rematch. And this time, the redhead accepts because after all, the boy had just saved his life. Since that's how it was, the two of them wasted no time and clashed right then and there. Right from the start, both unleashed the twin blade strike at the same time. But Errol's power carried one extra slash, so when two cuts from each fighter canceled each other out in the collision, that final strike broke through and landed squarely on target. The redhead scoffed, reminding him that the skill was called twin blades, not triplets. Errol just shrugged and explained that he didn't bother with such limiting details. What mattered, he said, was shaping a technique so it served you better in the heat of battle. The redhead wasn't about to accept a lecture from someone without a class. He raised his sword once more, recalling how he had learned fencing from his father, Captain Evans. Losing wasn't an option, not to anyone, and especially not to a boy who hadn't even been granted a class by the goddess. One way or another, he knew one thing for sure. He'd have to stay sharp against this opponent. And yet, even though he had sworn to watch out for that third slash of the twin blade, he fell for the same attack again and lost the duel. Breathing hard, he asked if Errol had gone easy on him in their last fight, because this time he was clearly much faster than before. Errol shook his head and explained that it was thanks to his rival that he'd been able to see his own limitations and push past the weaknesses that had cost him that first defeat. A few days later, over tea in the evening, Farah mentioned to the family that Evans's son had left for Brescia that very day, a place known as the City of Swords where Farah herself had once been part of the local guild before she married. Hearing that, Errol felt a pull in his chest. He longed to go to a place like that too, but the thought haunted him. How far could someone without a class really go? Even so, one thing was certain: he wanted to find out, and the only way to know was to try. Speaking of Brescia, that's exactly where a group of travelers is arriving by carriage. Since it's the ideal city for anyone who carries a sword, the passengers can hardly hide their excitement. One woman in the group proudly declares herself a dual-blade swordswoman, while a young man beside her boasts that he's a barbarian. The woman invites him to form a party with her, but the man quickly makes it clear he has no patience for people who wear such ridiculous outfits into battle. She calmly explains that her class requires agility, so she has to wear as little as possible in order to move swiftly. One way or another, the argument between them is already heating up. But before things escalate further, the carriage is suddenly surrounded by orcs in an ambush. The driver, trying to keep things under control, politely asks the adventurers to put their skills to use. As if the horde wasn't enough, among them looms an orc king, a massive beast who clearly won't be easy to bring down. The barbarian knows full well it would take a squad to topple that monster, but the swordswoman, clutching her child, begs him to fight. Still, the man refuses, shoving the mother aside, and just like him, the dual-blade swordswoman abandons the carriage and flees. That's when the last passenger, a quiet young man who hasn't said a word until now, steps down from the vehicle and faces the enemy. As he charges forward, his hood falls back and the crowd realizes it's Errol. The others watch in stunned silence. His skill in battle is so extraordinary that it feels more like watching a performance than a fight. His speed, his technique, the way he moves through the orcs, it's less like a warrior fighting and more like an artist dancing through a deadly stage, cutting down enemies with unmatched grace. When he slips free from a ring of dozens of orcs, the driver no longer has any doubt. That counterattack is none other than the legendary Blade Dance, a technique belonging only to the Sword Princess class, even if only women are supposed to possess it. Finally, Errol faces the Orc King. In one blazing charge, he leaps at the beast just as it swings at him and drives his blade straight through the creature's skull. With victory behind him, he turns back to the driver and simply asks that they resume the journey. He wants to reach Brescia as soon as possible to train and become even stronger. The driver, still in awe, remarks that perhaps the young man is already strong enough. Meanwhile, the little boy from the carriage pipes up, asking what class such a powerful warrior belongs to. When Errol answers that he doesn't belong to any class at all, everyone is left speechless. 5 years earlier, Errol was training in the yard with his mother. After he executed a technique, she remarked that it looked just like the twin blade slash. He admitted it was, though she wasn't entirely sure. It was late, and she was too sleepy to tell whether she was awake or dreaming. Even so, she couldn't quite believe that her son, born without a class, could truly pull off such a powerful technique. Calmly, Errol explained that he had mastered it simply by practicing, that this was no dream, and that he intended to learn many more techniques the same way. He asked his mother to teach him a few Sword Princess abilities, so that once he had mastered them, he could travel to Brescia and discover how to make use of it all. Hearing this, his mother couldn't help but smile proudly, insisting that despite everything, her son was a true prodigy. And then Errol is brought back to the present. The driver announces that they've finally arrived in Brescia. As he enters the City of Swords, the boy is overwhelmed by the sheer number of swordsmen scattered everywhere. not to mention the countless advanced classes among them. He even finds it curious that the driver was able to recognize certain things about sword techniques that someone in his profession normally wouldn't. When asked, the man admits he's actually a holy knight, an advanced class. Fighting every day is exhausting, so sometimes he takes on carriage work just to clear his head. It's a life that Errol himself had never considered, though he admits it does sound like an interesting hobby. In any case, the driver advises him to start by joining a guild, since most swordsmen in Brescia make a living by winning battle tournaments, and you can only enter if you belong to a guild. Errol agrees, explaining that his goal is to face the strongest warriors around. But the Holy Knight warns him to tread carefully. Some guilds in that city are far more ruthless than they appear. After parting ways with the man, Errol wanders the streets and sees two armored warriors recruiting people for the cavalry, a noble guild made up of knights. Nearby, two women invite anyone with a blade to join the sword road. Even thieves and hunters are welcome. In the middle of it all, a girl sneaks up on Errol, but stumbles and falls when he abruptly changes direction. Though she's never seen him before, she acts as if she's been chasing him for ages, shoving a contract in his face and demanding he sign it to join her guild. Errol brushes her off and starts to walk away, but when she grabs his belt and refuses to let go, he can't help but point out that no one gets that desperate to recruit unless they're part of some rookie guild starving for members. The girl insists her group is actually famous, and what's more, if he joins, he'll even get the chance to go on a date with the beauty standing right in front of him. Errol flatly tells her he has no interest, growing irritated when he realizes she acts exactly like his sister, full of herself, even though she's flat as a board. Setting his annoyance aside, he asks which guild is considered the most powerful in the region. Though clearly offended at being ignored, she admits it's probably the Black Blade, boasting 8 rank a swordsman. Without wasting any time, and following the stranger's instructions, Errol arrives at a grand mansion. He introduces himself to the guard and declares his desire to join the Black Blade. The guard informs him that before anything else, he must take a test at the reception desk. So, Errol makes his way there and finds a line of candidates waiting to participate in the admission exam. Excited, he waits eagerly for his turn. When his moment finally comes, he's asked about his class and bursts of laughter echo from the attendant when he answers that he's classless. After all, this guild only accepts advanced swordsmen. The clerk promptly dismisses him. Errol insists, even asking them to make an exception, confident that he could pass the trial. But the man behind the desk simply shrugs. Rules are rules. Suddenly, an A-rank swordsman strides into the reception hall, stealing the attention of everyone present. The candidates watch in awe at the advanced warrior's presence. Errol, on the other hand, couldn't be further from that recognition. As a classless, he's left with no choice but to try his luck elsewhere. Yet no matter where he goes, he's immediately turned down, never given even the slightest chance to prove his abilities. After a pause to mourn his failure, he recalls the letter of recommendation his mother gave him. She had told him to deliver it to her old guild. They might give him a helping hand. Just then, the same annoying girl from before shows up again. Realizing he still hasn't joined any guild, she renews her invitation for him to join her. This time, seeing that he's determined to refuse her to the bitter end, she actually kneels before him, begging him to accept. She even goes so far as to promise she'd lick his boots if he said yes. But Errol, unfazed, rejects her again and storms off without a second thought. Humiliated, but not defeated, the girl persists in her mission to recruit him. Since they're already near her guild's headquarters, she insists that at the very least he should pay them a visit. Errol is truly impressed by the sheer size of their guild hall, though it makes him wonder why such a place has so few members. Cornered, the girl admits the truth. This group is only a shadow of its former glory. Nowadays, they're among the weakest guilds in the city. Still, she swears their golden days will return. For as long as the King of Two Swords leads them, Dragon Fang will never die. That name makes Errol pause. His mother had once told him her guild was led by none other than the King of Two Swords himself, who had named the clan after one of his techniques, Dragon Fang. Realizing this was his mother's guild, Errol finally decides to join. He's led into a chamber, where the girl asks him to sit. There, slouched in a chair, is her father. She scolds him immediately for drinking again. Errol assumes this must be the King of Two Swords, though the man is missing his right arm, and speaking of him, he doesn't even give Errol a chance. He simply tells the boy to leave, saying the guild is doomed. Saddened by her father's pathetic state, the girl explains that once upon a time he had been one of the 2 greatest swordsmen in Brescia, but ever since he lost his arm, he drowned himself in reckless drinking. Because of that, she imagines Errol would want nothing to do with their guild. To her shock, though, he declares without hesitation that he'll join them mainly because no other guild will take him. Overjoyed, she brings out the contract once again. He signs it, and when she reads his information class, None. She assumes it's a joke, but Errol presents an official document proving otherwise. Still, she draws a sword from the wall and warns him to tear up the contract if he wants to live. After all, everyone knows that the bare minimum to join a guild is some basic swordsmanship, and this kid was standing there with such arrogant posture. She hadn't even considered he might really be classless. Their shouting draws another woman into the room. "Lilia, what on earth is going on?" she asks. Lilia runs to her, throws her arms around her, and vents her frustration. She thought she had found a perfect new recruit, but instead she brought home a useless classless. At those words, Rioner studies Errol more closely and suddenly recognizes him. They had trained together in the same village as children. Errol racks his brain. He's sure he would remember a woman this beautiful. Unless, ironically, she's the child of Captain Evans, that obnoxious redhead rival of his childhood. Rioner clarifies that Evans only had a daughter, and that daughter is her. She doesn't blame him for not recognizing her. After all, her hair has grown a lot since then. Errol smirks and says other things have grown too, if you catch his meaning. Lilia suddenly realizes this must be the very classless boy her friend once admitted she couldn't beat when they were younger. And speaking of which, Rioner wastes no time. She challenges him to a rematch. On the training grounds, Rioner begins the duel with the same skill she had used 5 years earlier, Twin Blade Slash. Errol can't help but find it ironic, since she knows he can nullify that ability by repeating the same move. Yet when he tries it, her slash overpowers his and lands squarely. Rioner declares she's far stronger now than she was back then, and she proves it by driving a sword into the ground, one 5 times heavier than any normal blade. Thanks to the brutal strength skill she wields as a mighty swordswoman, she's capable of crushing her opponent. With that, she charges forward and unleashes a flurry of heavy blows. Errol struggles to block them all. He realizes she's reached one of the advanced swordsman classes, and he knows he'll be defeated if he keeps letting himself take those hits. So, he pulls back to create distance. In his mind, if this is the speed she's working with, then he doesn't need to worry too much about being struck. Offended by the provocation, Rioner charged at her target, dropped her guard, and landed a sword strike on him. However, that was only an illusion of her rival, who appeared behind the mighty swordswoman and slashed at her. Rioner couldn't understand how that man had been able to use the shadow technique, a supreme ability that was difficult even for more advanced swordsmen. Taking advantage of his exceptional speed, he managed to strike his opponent once again. But because of her class, even when hit, she didn't lose her divine protection. Considering she possessed the courage skill, his attacks weren't strong enough to cause any real damage. In this situation, Errol resorted to the ability Counterattack, a sword princess technique he had learned from his mother. Using this move, he managed to block one of Rioner's strikes and win the duel. Ashamed of losing once again after insisting so much on a rematch, Rioner was even more humiliated when she ran out of the training grounds, crying loudly. Finally, after his demonstration of strength, Errol was accepted into the group by Lilia, who decided to pretend she had believed in him from the very start. Now that he was in, the boy asked why the guild was in such terrible shape, and the girl whispered in his ear just how much money they owed to some strange folks. Even so, she promised they would turn things around soon, because a battle competition was about to begin, and they would take part in it to earn the money they needed. The reason Lilia had been so desperate to recruit a new member was that each guild needed at least 3 participants to enter the tournament. Assuming Rioner would be one of the participants, Errol couldn't understand why such a talented swordswoman was stuck at this guild hall doing nothing. That's when Lilia explained that, back when she was a child and couldn't get accepted into any guild in the city, her father had extended his hand to the young woman. Since then, she felt indebted to the guild and stayed with them out of sheer loyalty, since no one else had accepted her. Aside from that, although she recognized her companion's strength, Lilia didn't seem very confident about winning the tournament, since the 3 of them would have to face a group of 5 opponents. Even so, Errol showed remarkable confidence and declared that this would be a great chance for him to refine his techniques after all. That was the very reason he had come to Brescia. Watching through the crack of the door, Lilia's father had been listening to the entire conversation until he decided to walk away after hearing the new Dragon Fang member's final words. When he wakes up the next day, Errol takes a few seconds to remember that he joined his mother's guild. After getting ready and going down to the hall, where he meets 2 of his teammates, he comments that it's been a long time since he last slept in a real bed, so he slept like an angel last night. He glances at Rioner and figures she's still in a bad mood because she lost to him. Once everyone is gathered, Lilia has an important announcement to make. Now that the guild has reached the minimum number of members required to enter the championship, they will sign up for the competition this weekend. If they win, they'll earn the money they need to get the guild back on its feet. The competition is a knockout format, where one participant faces another in a one-on-one match, and the guild that runs out of fighters loses. The limit is 5 fighters per team, and the minimum is 3. In other words, everyone in that room are the Dragon's Fang adventurers who will take part. Ryuner thinks it's going to be very difficult, but Lilia assures her it won't be as hard as it sounds, because they have 2 B rank swordsmen on the team. While it's rare to find an opponent of a rank, Errol asks what this rank thing is about, and Ryuner, a bit annoyed that he doesn't even know that, explains that the rank represents a swordsman's individual strength. Lilia adds that there are 4 ranks, from D to A, and that out of 500 swordsmen in Brescia, only about 20 are at the top rank. She says both she and Ryuner are B rank, and since Errol defeated Ryuner, he probably is too. If they don't face any A ranks in the tournament, they can definitely take the title. The matchups will be announced at the Coliseum soon, so Lilia decides to go there now to see who they'll be facing. After the girl leaves, Ryuner goes out to train, and Errol calls her by her name in a casual way, which irritates her. Ignoring her annoyance, he asks what other abilities she has besides brute strength. Reluctantly, the woman reveals that she possesses courage, which reduces divine protection consumption. Wanting to learn that technique, Errol stands up, grabs the girl's hand, and asks her to beat him up with her sword. Ryuner refuses, but the guy insists that this is their chance to get closer. Imagining the situation, the swordswoman doesn't understand how that could bring them closer. So, realizing he didn't explain it properly, Errol tells her he needs to take hits in order to recreate the state of courage, that is, the ability to endure more damage, since the way to train it is by taking blows without using divine protection. Ryuner takes offense, saying that abilities are blessings from the goddess and can't be learned or bought. But Errol reminds her that she herself saw him using the twin blade slash that she possesses. Because of that, he ends up convincing her, and the two go to the training room. Ryuner offers her sword but doubts Errol will really be able to wield it, since the weapon weighs 5 times more than a normal one, and he doesn't have brute strength. Even so, Errol easily draws the sword and says it's not just about brute force. For example, he developed twin blade slash and the shadow technique through daily training. And the fact that he's lifting such a heavy sword should be proof that perseverance beats talent. If effort means nothing, Ryuner admits with frustration that she's just an ordinary swordswoman. Either way, she agrees to train him, as long as he doesn't cry during it because she won't go easy. Errol replies that he feels great having such a strong woman in the same group, so the girl hits him with the sheath. Meanwhile, Lilia arrives back at the guild headquarters, running like crazy. When she finds her friends, she delivers the bad news she just found out at the Coliseum. They'll be facing the most powerful guild in the city, Black Blade, which has no less than 8 A-rank swordsmen, and their leader, Jorg, is as devious as a snake. Even so, Lilia doesn't want to back down now, so all that's left is for them to train like mad until the day of the competition. Then, looking at her teammates, she almost loses it when she realizes that Ryuner probably left Errol with a permanent injury just days before the tournament. A few days later, injured or not, Errol goes to the competition. It's the big day. In front of the Coliseum, the trio hears 2 townsmen talking about the match between Dragon's Fang and Black Blade. Since Dragon's Fang hasn't fought in a long time, everyone's betting on their rivals. Lilia gets furious and tries to go after them, but Ryuner holds her back. Errol didn't know you could bet on this kind of competition, and Lilia grumbles that their odds are 20 to 1 now. In other words, nobody believes in them, but if they win, they'll win a fortune. Confident in victory, the girl basically bet everything on them, even mortgaging the house and borrowing money to do it. If they win, Dragon's Fang will become extremely rich and never again be called a failed guild. Ryuner points out that things will get even worse if they lose, but Lilia is so obsessed that she promises to go on a wild quest for glory on the battlefield to restore the guild's former fame. Hearing their conversation, a man laughs, amused by the way the girl defends her father's guild. Lilia frowns when she realizes it's Jorg himself, the leader of Black Blade. Jorg comments that the rivals even recruited a classless guy to their team, and, ironically, says he's not there to mock them but to support them, since it's sad to see his old rival doing so poorly. In fact, he says, that's why he arranged this match between their 2 guilds. It'll be a great chance for Lilia and her dear Dragon's Fang to make a lot of money by winning the fight. All she has to do is defeat the several A-rank swordsmen waiting on the other side of the ring. The leader of the Black Blade lets out a laugh as he says that, but his opponent insists that she's going to win. In the end, the man mockingly praises the girl's bravery and warns that he'll see for himself how much courage she really has once the fight begins. Either way, the long-awaited moment finally arrives for the entire population of Brescia, who had been eager to see the city's currently strongest guild face off against another that, although no longer the same as before, was once responsible for countless victories in the past. Errol checks the duelist bracket and doesn't see the rival leader's name on the list, so he assumes they're giving him an easy time. However, Lilia gets nervous and reminds him that absolutely all of them are Ranka, not just Jorg. Errol, meanwhile, remains calm and sees this tournament as a chance to learn new abilities. Lilia grows even angrier, since the guild's future depends on this stupid tournament, and Errol mutters that she's the one who bet everything they had on this mess. In the meantime, the first duelist of the afternoon is called Geo, the fencer from the Black Blade, against Errol, the classless. The crowd falls completely silent the moment a classless is announced in the ring, until a general murmur begins questioning how this guy could have the nerve to accept a challenge of this level. Geo, arrogant as ever, grumbles that he shouldn't have to face someone so weak, being rank A, and that he'd rather 1,000 times be having fun with the girls from the rival group. Still, he's not the one who chooses the duels. So when the match begins, the fencer uses blink of an eye and extremely fast lunge to strike and pierce his sword through his opponent's torso. However, Errol had only placed a shadow of himself as bait, and now that Geo looks around, there are more shadows spread across the battlefield. Even so, the member of the Black Blade is sure he can finish them all at once, but he didn't expect his opponent to be able to summon 4 shadows at the same time, which overwhelms him. With a clever attack from the enemy's blind spot, Errol manages to approach in the middle of the confusion and hit Geo squarely with a thrust. In disbelief, Geo slowly falls to the ground, while Errol calmly points out that 4 shadows at once isn't much, since his mother can summon 5 when she's not even trying. When the announcer declares the classless as the winner, the crowd goes wild, while Rioner can hardly believe that this boy managed to defeat a swordsman so easily. As for Errol, after managing to imitate his opponent's thrust, he tells himself he needs to practice that technique better. And Jorg, after seeing with his own eyes what the opponent is capable of, loses that mocking look on his face. In his next duel, after being attacked fiercely and managing to gain some distance from his opponent, Errol launches the Twin Blade Slash and defeats another rank A. Then, facing an extremely fast fighter who uses kicks as a surprise element, Errol relies on his shadows to stay untouched and fool his opponent, once again winning the match with a quick attack from behind. After that, Rioner doesn't even know what to say about what she's seeing. Lilia, on the other hand, gets excited at the possibility that Errol might beat everyone, since she personally wouldn't stand a chance against those guys. Next, Errol faces his 4th opponent, who, besides having a huge shield that keeps him well protected, has an extremely high natural defense, making his divine protection resemble an almost impenetrable armor. Even so, the Dragon Fang fighter stays focused on the battle, because since he can't break through that divine protection all at once, he'll have to hit the man repeatedly to wear it down little by little. Nervous for not being able to hit Errol, the shield bearer accuses him of not being classless at all, and when Errol explains that one can achieve miracles with training, he refuses to believe it, insisting that it's impossible to surpass someone who has a class when you don't have any. To prove his point, the tank fakes a sword strike and spins to attack with his shield. Errol then uses his prediction technique, the hardest of all the abilities his mother taught him to master, by reading his rival's movement and kicking the shield. Errol disarms the opponent and now has a clear path to victory. By the way, in response to the man's doubt, Errol confirms that he actually learned how to deliver that kick in the previous fight, then gives another free demonstration by slamming his shin into the big guy's stomach. In disbelief, the man keeps insisting it's impossible to learn such complex techniques so quickly, and Errol fully agrees. Truly learning to use them as abilities takes time, but when it's just about copying a move, it's possible to do it immediately, to some extent. Speaking of which, Errol picks up the rival's shield from the ground and, combining the blink of an eye charge with this new weapon, delivers a powerful shield blow that defeats his target and ends the fight, with yet another duel ending without the Dragon Fang member even being touched. The audience starts accusing Errol of lying about being classless. In response to the accusations, the committee organizing the championship decides to reveal the competitor's class record for everyone to see, using a crystal orb that identifies the class contained in the participant's record. The organization proves to the public that Errol truly doesn't belong to any class. As a result, the crowd falls in love with the boy who was supposed to be the weakest, but who has instead shown himself to be unbeatable in the competition. On that note, Lilia complains that Rioner didn't tell her earlier how overpowered that guy is. Otherwise, she would have pawned all her father's secret weapons and added them to the bet. By the way, the clever girl then decides she's going to marry him, since he'll be the one to restore her father's guild's honor. However, despite the girl's excitement, the competition was not over yet. The last challenger of the afternoon was called to the ring, Master Swordsman Masamune. Errol was impressed by his opponent's rare sword, which had a long, curved blade. He asked if it was a katana, and Masamune confirmed. Rioner wondered if this man was an Eastern samurai, a highly advanced class. When the fight began, even though the samurai hadn't even touched his sword, Errol could feel an overwhelming intensity coming from him that made him realize that approaching this guy recklessly could mean his end. For some reason, since the opponent hadn't taken a single step, Masamune decided to reveal his strategy to lure Errol in and finish the duel with the death strike. Hearing that, Errol took a few steps forward. He didn't want to stay stuck in that standoff, and besides, he was eager to learn the samurai's deadly move. The Black Blade said it was impossible, since the moment he used the strike, Errol would already be lying on the ground. Even so, the classless boy trusted his speed and kept moving forward, while his opponent still hadn't drawn his sword. That made Errol wonder if the death strike came straight from the sheath. This stalemate caused great hesitation in the boy, who didn't know whether to use his shadows after all. The target was extremely focused, and there was a risk he'd recognize the real Errol. Even so, the Dragon Fang kept advancing, and when he reached a proper distance, Masamune answered with an EI slash. But to his surprise, Errol managed to move faster than the sword and avoided the attack. Although Masamune was the fastest swordsman he had ever seen in this city, the classless one had been trained by someone even faster. With that, he counterattacked with the storm thrust, a furious sequence of piercing strikes that hit the samurai's back, thus ending the duel and the tournament. Lilia was amazed as she witnessed the most lethal move of the Sword Princess class. While the announcer declared the victory of the Dragon Fang Guild, the audience went crazy after all. Everyone had bet on the Black Blade, while Lilia and Ryuner, on the other hand, hugged each other when they realized they were now rich. After Errol left the ring, Lilia tried to give her friend a big hug, but out of habit, he dodged with his usual speed, making the girl crash onto the floor. Beside her, Ryuner had also been ready to hug him, but quickly pretended that wasn't the case. Noticing her melons, Errol jokingly suggested that she should take off her armor if she really wanted to hug someone. Lilia, in turn, made it clear that she wouldn't mind taking everything off. But when she tried to hug the guy again, she ended up on the floor once more. Meanwhile, watching Errol from afar, Jorg promised he wouldn't let this slide. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.